Good afternoon, everyone. Uh, we welcome you all to our webinar on the compliances under GST and a practical walk through all these compliances and what are the issues and the best practices that can be adopted. So before starting the webinar, we'd like to spend 2 minutes at why this webinar was needed and what was the objective to it. So when we did do compliances for our clients, a lot of time it was observed that, and compliances include filing of returns and undertaking GST audits, and especially during the GST audit, it was observed that a lot of routine compliances month on month were incorrectly done by the taxpayers. Same error was being repeatedly done. There were errors in reconciliation of month-wise month GSTR1 and GSTR3B that a taxpayer is required to file. There were errors in respect of determination of POS. There were errors for claiming credits, and so on and so forth. Usually, when the GST audit is done, a lot of time lags happens, and therefore a lot of due dates for making those correct rectifications naturally die. Resultantly, this results in either the tax payments being made by the taxpayer at time of filing of GST or annual returns, or there's a lot of input tax credit loss that naturally happens. We thought that it is important that these common mistakes and common errors are brought to the notice of public at large. We will also be discussing what are our thoughts on the best practices that can be adopted so that these common mistakes do not occur in regular. In this webinar, we'll be touching upon the compliances under GST. We'll be talking about, besides compliances, the generation of e-way bills, the common mistakes that taxpayers do in e-way bill generation, because that again was a notice exercise that routine inconsistencies have been done in e-way bill generation. And lastly, we'll be throwing a bit of idea on what happens to filing of refund claims, what are the changes that have been made, and what are the procedures that a taxpayer needs to adhere. So the webinar particularly gets split into 4 parts. We'll be speaking about the background over the GST compliances, the common mistakes and the best practices that can be done to ensure that the compliances are done in a routine manner and there are no inconsistencies. We'll be similarly talking about e-way bills and refunds, and we'll be giving our way ahead that what shall be our thoughts on the way forward that can be adopted. Starting over to the background. So as all of you would be aware, in the pre-July regime, when GST was about to get introduced, the government launched that there shall be 3 return filing system. GSTR1, which shall be filed by 10th of every month. GSTR2, which shall have an auto-populated detail basis GSTR1 filed, wherein a taxpayer would have the option to accept, reject, or keep pending the supplies. And there will be GSTR3, which will be consolidated return, which shall get generated auto-populated through GSTR1 and GSTR2. The objective of this scheme particularly was that there is a simplification in return filing system. There's a lot of transparency as you disclose things and then gets auto-populated into subsequent returns. And there's a standardization with all across on the GST compliances to be done. Well, all was thought the realities was not like that. In reality, the government struggled with its IT infrastructure. GSTR2 and GSTR3 got deferred and is still deferred indefinitely. Now it has been suspended only. GSTR1 was a return that was in operation. GSTR3B was introduced as a summary return. When GSTR3B was introduced, there was no concept of matching. So all taxpayers were required to avail credit basis thereupon assessments. The government then proposed to have a relook at the entire return filing system, and they introduced return forms in place of the existing GSTR1, 2, and 3 with so-called ANX1, ANX2, and RET1. While those were introduced, the government came up with a condition of availing credit basis rule 36(4), which they introduced, which provided a reconciliation of input tax credit, and whatever was there available in form GSTR 2A, 10% over that amount was eligible as credit. So condition was introduced that availing credit shall not happen through a self-assessment basis. It shall happen through the details that have been uploaded by the supplier, and 10% grace will be granted. The government now is thinking of a plan of linking GSTR 1, GSTR 2A with GSTR 3B. So in form of a structure where you will file GSTR 1, your data in 3B will get auto-populated, wherein your 2A gets submitted, your data in your GSTR 3B gets auto-populated. So till the new form is into place, the government is focusing on having a better IT infrastructure on filing of GSTR 1, GSTR 2A, and GSTR 3B. However, how the present system looks is that a taxpayer files a GSTR 1 by 11th of each month. GSTR 1 is typically a summary of all the supplies made. So it covers the B2B supplies, B2CL supplies, zero-rated supplies transaction, B2CS transaction, which are net of debit and credit notes, nil-rated, exempt, and non-GST outward supply transactions. If a taxpayer is required to carry out any amendment, that amendment is only possible through GSTR 1, that gets carried out. And lastly, GSTR 1 contains an important functionality of HSN summary and a document series that needs to be provided. Once a GSTR 1 is filed, a taxpayer is required to perform a GSTR 2A reconciliation as contemplated under Rule 36(4). Importantly, GSTR 2A is a lot of dynamic and gets updated or modified as soon as any of the supplier changes the data. Once GSTR 2A reconciliation is done, a taxpayer is required to file a GSTR 3B, which is a monthly summary returns. It contains the basic details of the taxable supplies made, the tax liability that accrues on such supplies under RCM supplies, the zero-rated supplies that are made, a segregation of credit between eligible, ineligible credits, exempt supply transaction gets reported, taxes get paid in GSTR 3B, and if any TDS or TCS credit needs to be availed, that gets availed in GSTR 3B. So precisely the current framework is a lot simpler, but the current framework has a lot of issues. Typical among is that there is always a reconciliation issue between GSTR 1 and GSTR 3B. And as we mentioned that GSTR 2A being a dynamic field, there is a reconciliation issue between GSTR 2B and GSTR 3B. This naturally over a period of time has resulted into a lot of discrepancies and a lot of notices being issued to the authorities. Therefore, it is all the more important that the compliances needs to be carefully performed, a timing needs to be correct so that while these notices can be ignored, annual return can be routinely filed. So we'll now go into what are the common mistakes that a taxpayer does and our suggestion on those common mistakes, what shall be the best practices. My colleague Raina will be taking over the session and will be describing about all these things. Raina, over to you.
Thank you, Kulraj, for the background. Good evening, everybody. I would like to start stating the common mistakes that a taxpayer does by stating a very famous quote which says, "To err is human," which means that only human beings makes mistakes, and so does a taxpayer or an assessee who is filing their GST returns. I would be taking the session wherein I would be highlighting the common mistakes that a taxpayer does and the best practices that can be followed. The first mistake, and a very common mistake that most of us do, is reporting of B2B supplies as our B2C supplies. This can be because of various reasons. For example, the master data of the taxpayer is not properly maintained, or while preparing the data, I make a clerical error. Also, in this case, the invoice is correctly issued, but at the time of reporting, the same is not reported correctly. A consequence of this is that the recipient loses their ITC, and also it a reconciliation issue between the books of accounts and the GST returns happens, especially at the time of filing of GSTR 9. There are a few recommendations that we would like to make in this case. For the past, if a supply has been incorrectly made as B2C supplies, then the same can be adjusted on a consolidated basis, and the tax invoice, the correct tax invoice, can be uploaded in form GSTR 1 so that it gets reflected in GSTR 2A and the recipient gets credit of that. Also, for future, we would recommend that a customer master is created with all GSTNs and relevant details of the customers, and it is also updated on regular basis. A reconciliation with the books of accounts is to be performed while filing GSTR 1 so that there is no mismatch in the same. Coming to the next mistake, wherein the tax is paid under incorrect heads. This usually happens when my determination of place of supply is incorrect. So what happens is, if I determine the incorrect place of supply, then in GSTR 1 I disclose IGST in place of CGST and SGST, or vice versa, and then using the workings of GSTR 1 I also pay my taxes in GSTR 3B, where I pay these taxes as reported in GSTR 1. A consequence of this is that I may wrongly pay tax in GSTR 3B, and later when they have to be correctly discharged, then an interest exposure on the same occurs. Further, a mismatch of tax heads is considered ineligible or not eligible for the purposes of claiming ITC as per Rule 36(4). So this particular transaction wherein incorrect tax heads is coming in GSTR 2A, then the recipient may not be able to claim tax ITC of the same. Also, such POS mismatch creates a reconciliation issue between my books of accounts and the returns for the purposes of GSTR 9. A recommendation for this can be, for the past, an appropriate adjustment is to be made in GSTR 1 and GSTR 3B, and if this adjustment is not possible, then correct tax is to be paid and the refund of the incorrect tax paid can be claimed. For future, it is recommended that the taxpayer should focus on determination of the correct place of supply, because the determination of tax heads depends on place of supply. Also, while you are paying your tax liability, the same should be reconciled with the books of accounts before filing the GST returns. Coming to the next common mistake that a taxpayer usually does is disclosure of SEZ supplies. Now, reporting of SEZ supplies in GSTR 1 is done where you are disclosing your B2B supplies, and in GSTR 3B, the same is required to be done in table 3.1.b, where zero rated supplies are required to be disclosed. But what happens is that because in GSTR 1, this supply is this particular supply is disclosed as a taxable supply in B2B, the same effect is taken in GSTR 3B as well, and which creates a reconciliation issue between GSTR 1 and GSTR 3B. Also, in GSTR 1, while we are disclosing your B2B supplies, a taxpayer doesn't usually select the supply type, but specifically for SEZ supplies, this supply type is to be separately selected. And the supply type can be with payment of tax or without payment of tax under NUT. This also creates a major challenge between a major challenge for sanction of refunds, because for sanctioning of refunds, a mirror image of GSTR 1 and GSTR 3B is required to be created. And in case there is even a small mismatch in these two, then the sanction of refunds can be very stressful, and it creates a major challenge in that. A recommendation for the past can be that in GSTR 1, this tax type or any other clerical error with respect to these SEZ supplies can be amended in table 9 of GSTR 1. Also, a consolidated adjustment of the amount can be made in GSTR 3B in table 3.1.b. For future, it is recommended that for SEZ suppliers, a separate master is created, and the same should be updated regularly. Also, the tax liability is to be reconciled with the books of accounts before filing the GST returns, and specific focus to SEZ suppliers should be given. Coming to the next mistake that a taxpayer usually does is that while they recover certain payments or certain recoveries from the employees, like canteen facility, bus transportation, insurance, etc., the taxpayer usually pays tax of these recoveries in GSTR 3B, but they do not issue a corresponding tax invoice of the same. And since this tax invoice is not issued, it is also not uploaded in GSTR 1. A consequence of this is that it creates a major reconciliation issue between GSTR 1 and GSTR 3B. Also, there is a non-compliance of provisions related to issuance of invoice. A recommendation in this case is that for tax invoices, that tax invoices should be issued and uploaded in GSTR 1, as well as a taxpayer can adopt maintaining of separate invoice series for all such type of recoveries to keep a check whether such compliance is done on a regular basis or not. Coming to the next mistake that a taxpayer usually does is a non-disclosure of certain supplies in GSTR 1. As we disclose our taxable supplies, we also disclose our zero rated supplies correctly, but still certain supplies like nil rated supplies, for example, electricity, exempt supplies like agricultural produce, or non-GST supplies like alcohol is missed to be disclosed. Because these do not bear any taxes, so a taxpayer usually misses to disclose these supplies. These are required to be separately done in GSTR 1. Also, HSN of goods and services is required to be separately disclosed in GSTR 1, because as you all know that in GSTR 9 the same is required, and it is almost impossible. It gets almost impossible to do it on a consolidated basis for 12 months. So it is suggested that a monthly HSN should be maintained and disclosed in GSTR 1. Further, the document series that most taxpayers miss to disclose in GSTR 1 with respect to RCM, the reverse charge supplies, and also with respect to job work challans. The RCM supplies and the RCM paid in case of unregistered purchases, there's a separate document series of self invoices that is required to be maintained and disclosed in GSTR 1. It is important to note here that the delivery challan series should be different for job work transactions and transactions other than job work. Then a recent circular was issued to clarify that supplies made to unregistered interstate supplies is required to be separately disclosed in GSTR 3B. This is to be done state-wise, and so that appropriate taxes go to the respective states. Mostly in this case, what is done is that this disclosure of unregistered supply is combined or is consolidated in GSTR 3B, where normal taxable supply is disclosed. But Table 3.2 of GSTR 3B requires a separate disclosure of these supplies. Further, coming to reporting with respect to inward supplies, a very common mistake that a taxpayer does is availment of ITC based on incorrect tax heads. While a taxpayer can report an incorrect tax head, the recipient keeps claiming these incorrect tax heads without cross-checking the same and without getting them corrected. So when you're doing a two-way reconciliation and this issue, if there's an issue of this kind, then plain simple claiming of credit of these incorrect tax heads should not be done, and they should be asked, and the taxpayer should ask their supplier to correct these tax heads. Again, obviously, there is an incorrect availment of ITC in these cases. And also, while you're doing a two-way reconciliation under Rule 36(4), and this particular supply, for example, okay, so we can go through an example. In case of hotels, if a hotelier is making their outward supplies of a particular state, they will charge CNS on the same, and CNS is also reflected in GSTR 2A as it is. And while reconciling to claim credit under Rule 36(4), a taxpayer usually claims the credit of such CGST and SGST. This happens because there is no categorization between an eligible ITC and an ineligible ITC. And also, no taxpayer makes an extra effort to see what credit is coming in 2A and from which recipient such credit is coming. So a recommendation in this case, mostly we recommend that a due regard should be given to place of supply for availing ITC, and also this place of supply should be matched with the vendor GSTN, especially in case of ineligible ITC. There are also common mistakes that we do in reporting of certain inward supplies in case while filing GSTR 3B. Reversal of Rule 4243, which is required to be done if a taxpayer has their exempt supplies as well as taxable supplies. In such cases, this particular reversal is required to be disclosed separately. What the taxpayers usually do is that they compile or combine all reversals and they disclose it under others head, which obviously should not be done because a specific place for disclosing the Rule 4243 reversals has been given in GSTR 3B, and such reversals should be reported and disclosed separately. Also, because the calculation of ITC, this ineligible ITC in most cases is done on a net basis. So the taxpayer doesn't bother to disclose these ineligible ITC under Section 17(5), that is ITC of motor vehicle, ITC of food and beverage, etc. No taxpayer discloses these ITC separately. But since 3B requires such disclosures, these should be mandatorily done in GSTR 3B. Such ineligible ITC should be identified and disclosed here. We also mostly miss disclosing exempt and nil rated purchases. So a separate table wherein you have to segregate the interstate supplies and intrastate supplies. In case you are purchasing from purchasing exempt or nil rated purchases, these are required to be first segregated into interstate or intrastate, and then they're required to be disclosed here separately in GSTR 3B. We shall now highlight common issues on the GST portal. Not all mistakes are done by the taxpayers, but at times the GST portal also doesn't support you, and the taxpayers can perform various and the taxpayers are not able to perform various compliances because of the issues on the GST portal. The first and the very common issue on the GST portal is that that GSTR 3B does not accept negative values. What we mean here is that in case the value of a credit note and the tax thereon is more than the value of taxable supplies and the tax payable uh, in a particular month, then then GSTR 3B allows an adjustment of this credit note only to the extent of taxable supplies and tax payable. The balance amount is since GSTR 3B does not accept negative values, and then this balance amount is not the taxpayer is not able to disclose such the balance amount or take benefit of such balance amount. A recommendation in this case is that this adjustment of differential value can be done in the subsequent month. Alternatively, according to a recently issued circular, circular number 137, a taxpayer can claim refund in specific cases as in case of advances and in case of sales returns. Again, a very common issue on the GST portal that the taxpayer face while legally you are allowed to issue a debit note or a credit note in respect of multiple tax invoices, but because the portal doesn't allow allow disclosure of all original invoices or original invoice details with respect to that particular debit note or credit note. So the taxpayer is usually unable to disclose such details, which creates a reconciliation issue in the future when required. The details of all original invoice are not there with the taxpayer, and then the same is not provided also. What we recommend in this case is that again, since the portal allows only one original tax invoice detail, then the same should be uploaded. Also, it is actually possible to accept higher values. By higher values, we mean if the value of debit note or credit note issued is more than the value of original tax invoice, then the portal, although previously did not accept such disclosures, but now the portal accepts such higher values. Also, the taxpayer should maintain an annexure of all the tax invoices in respect of which the debit note or the credit note has been issued, so that a ready reconciliation of the same can be provided as and when required. Moving on. Another issue that a taxpayer faces is when they have raised a debit note or a credit note of the differential tax amount. What we mean here is that this debit note or a credit note is issued only of the tax value and not of the taxable amounts. This happens when there is a rate adjustment. For example, a debit note is required to be issued for the same taxable supplies or the same taxable value, but the rate of tax has increased or decreased. So a debit note or a credit note in this case will have to be issued and subsequently will have to be disclosed also on the GST portal. The taxpayer faces a challenge in this because the portal does not accept zero taxable value. So in this case, in most cases, this particular adjustment is required to be done manually only, because the utility will throw an error, and this particular supply or debit note or credit note where the taxable value is 0 will not be accepted by the portal. So such uploading should be done manually or directly on the portal. Moving on, in most cases, it has also been noticed that there is a statement specifically with respect to the TDS and TCS credit received. In case there is a deduction of TDS or TCS by the government or aggregators like e-commerce operators, the respective e-commerce operator or government authority is required to file their TDS and TCS returns, which subsequently reflects in your GST portal. But the credit of the same does not automatically can be claimed. So a specific statement with respect to this TDS and TCS credit received is to be submitted. As you can see on the GST portal, on the dashboard, there is a statement of TCS and TDS credit received, which can be which has in this the credit which is reflected is on this portal. All credit is reflected, and the taxpayer needs to accept it and then submit this particular statement. In this case, mostly what happens is after submission, the amount gets automatically transported to your cash ledger. We've also seen in this case that most taxpayers are claiming credit of this, are claiming self-assessed credit of this, which should not be done. And this particular statement should be filed to claim this TDS and TCS credit. With this, I hand over the presentation to Kulraj, and he would discuss the further slides. Thank you.
Thank you, Raina. Those changes were certainly important, and those discussions were relevant. I think we face these kind of challenges in day in and day out. So, moving further on this discussion, next part of the discussion would be on the credit that we avail under Rule 36(4). So, as we discussed earlier, the 36(4) creates a restriction on availing credit. It says that ITC only on the uploaded documents can be availed with a relaxation of over 10%. Importantly, these are applicable on invoices and debit notes uploaded by the supplier. In cases of RCM invoices, it gets applicable. The entire Rule 36(4) is not applicable on ISD invoices, import of goods, and RCM invoices, on which the credit can still be availed on self-assessment basis. So normally we have seen that a taxpayer do a lot of mistakes while complying with 36(4) as well. Firstly, we have seen a lot of taxpayers which have accumulated ITC balance that do not adhere to 36(4) at all. And if they do adhere on a consolidated basis because of the framework which provides that credit with the uploading which is there on the GST portal, you can take a credit of 110% of that amount. So a consolidation basis can be done. While legally there is no challenge to it, we recommend that an invoice basis reconciliation needs to be done on a monthly basis, so as to ensure that a requisite tap is made on the vendors. We should also be doing a reconciliation basis ineligible and eligible credits, because 36(4) provides a relaxation only with respect to, or condition with respect to, only eligible credit, not ineligible credit. While it is seen on a consolidated basis, a lot of ineligible credit, like restriction under 17(5) credits, do get triggered in, and we'll be able to claim a credit on that. Subsequently, if tomorrow verification is done, it will result in a tax liability only. So therefore, our recommendation in 36(4) is overall that do this exercise on a monthly basis, do this exercise basis ineligible and eligible credits, and do take an effect of debit and credit or not. This, do not ignore those transactions because this is important. Overall, on the compliance side, we feel that what Raina explained and what in a very brief I explained over 36.4 is that the customer master is the key. So you need to have the right customer master with the right GSTNs, whether the customer is an ISD, an SCZ supply, SCZ, or supposedly is a registered or not registered. So there, that is the basis for all the compliance. So if the books of accounts throw the right customer master, most of the results will get right only. While we believe that a lot of taxpayers file GSTR1 on the basis of GSTR1, GSTR3B is filed, in our view, a reconciliation with books of accounts is a must while filing GSTR1 and GSTR3B, because a lot of liabilities which is there in the books of accounts should get monthly tallied and matched with the GSTR1 and GSTR3B that we file. As we mentioned that adherence to Rule 36.4 is on an invoice level basis is not only a right compliance of the law, but also it shall ensure the right tap on vendors. And tomorrow we may not see any situations where, while 36.4 is normally complied, a lot of vendors have not filed their returns. So therefore, it tomorrow comes out to be that the credit ineligibility is certainly on us and credit liabilities to come up. So those should be avoided and invoice level matching should be done on 36.4. We believe that there is a software tool that can be used to perform all those links, all those linkages can be done. So while manually a taxpayer does a lot of compliances, but if a software tool is there, a lot of easiness that happens. So that can be used. Coming over to the next part of the discussion where you mentioned is on the EV bills. So EV bill have got a lot of importance in recent times. The normal recourse is the department has started issuing notice where they find that there's a difference in the amount of EV bill generated with GSTR1. So some taxpayers have started receiving show cause notices also from the department side for it. So coming over to the small background, and then we'll discuss the right issues. So EV bill typically comprise of two parts, Part A and Part B, and then results in EWB01. It certainly is applicable if the consignment value exceeds 50,000, both for intra and intra-state. There are certain states that have given relaxations and have increased the consignment value to ₹1 lakh and to more. If the consignment value is lower than 50,000, then the EV bill entire thing is an optional only. Part A generally contains the general description about the invoice detail. It contains the supply recipient details, place of delivery, document type, value of goods, transportation reasons, and so on. There's a relaxation that only Part A needs to be generated when the goods are transported to a transported premises which is located in the same state and 50 kilometers apart. Part B normally contains the details of vehicle and the transport document number. So now coming back to the issue that we face in EV bill that is there. So a lot of times we feel that document type is mentioned incorrect. So we must ensure that the document type which we select while generating EV bill is correct, whether it is tax invoice, delivery challan, bill of supply. A very common mistake that a lot of taxpayers do is that the document date is mentioned as the EV bill generation date. Mind here, the document date is the date of relevant invoice or delivery challan. It is not the date of generation of EV bill. So date of generation of EV bill is determined by the EV bill portal only. Here the document date is date of invoice. Another important thing is that we must also always be mindful from the place where the goods are actually dispatched. It could be your premises, it could be a third-party premises. So we must be careful while mentioning the dispatch from location, and it can be any other location as well, but right disclosure needs to be made. And generally in bill to ship to scenario, we have seen that bill to ship to either gets swapped, bill to ship to either gets samed. So if the typical invoice has a separate bill to ship to transaction and it's a separate bill to ship to address, then those should actually be replicated on the EV bill. Otherwise, we have seen a lot of cases that the consignments conveyance get held up only on the fact that bill to ship to details are not correctly mentioned. Next important thing is that The e-way bill portal requires a taxable value should be mentioned. That should be there, and that should match with the corresponding document details, be it invoice or a delivery challan. Tax amount also is required to be mentioned, where the supplies are exempt, only then there is an exclusion to it. Last and very importantly, we have noticed that a lot of times the vehicle number is also incorrect. So there are government clarification that how vehicle number should be traced up. So if the vehicle number doesn't formulate to the specific guidelines, then the vehicle can be detained, the e-way bill can be stopped, the e-way bill operations can be stopped. So importantly, the government has given a guideline. So if, like in this example, if you're mentioning that the RC number is DEF234, but the portal requires a 7-digit number, so we can mention DEF0234. So those ways changes has to be done. One very recent clarification is that the e-way bill portal is not accepting the cases where the vehicle number is not registered. So it's an additional check on your part to ensure that the vehicle is registered. If a vehicle whose RC has expired, the e-way bill portal will not generate a e-way bill for that. So generally coming over to the what are the challenges, other the challenges that the taxpayers face. So as a very particular guideline that e-way bill can be cancelled in 24 hours, it cannot be cancelled, edited post that. So one thing that needs to be tackled. Another is a recent change that government came up with. If the GST returns have not been filed for the past 2 periods, the e-way bill will not get generated. In such a case, once we file the return, we need to file an EWB05 with the authorities for unblocking the e-way bill. Next is if there is in conveyance or multiple invoices are issued, so we would recommend e-way bill to be generated with each such invoice. A transporter has the option to generate a single consolidated e-way bill, but a taxpayer for all the invoices needs to generate a e-way bill, even though the movement happens in one particular conveyance. If the conveyance is changed during the course of movement, then Part B details can be updated, and that shall be a due compliance. If there are multiple conveyances that are used for a single invoice, then there are guidelines to it also that there can be a delivery challan that can be generated for all such conveyance, and for the last consignment the goods can move from the tax invoice. So this is again a very typical issue wherein the invoice contains a plethora of goods, however those cannot be moved under a single consignment. So in such a cases, a taxpayer needs to generate a delivery challan with a reference to invoice, and the goods can be moved on the basis of the delivery challan. The last consignment can have the original invoice in that case. The last part of the presentation that we would like to highlight is on the refund claims. So typically, there are 3 kinds of refund claims that are there in the GST regime. One is the outward side refund claim, wherein a taxpayer does perform a zero-digit supply and pay GST on that. There are refund claims on output side on deemed exports, and there could be refund claim arising of incorrect payment of taxes on output side. There are refund claim options on input side on accumulated ITC when a taxpayer is engaged in making zero-digit supplies. There could be second option where a taxpayer is into inverted duty structure where the rate of tax on output supply is lower than the rate of tax on input supply, leading to credit accumulation. And the law allows you to claim refund in other cases as well, typically in cases of excess payment of tax, or if a refund is arisen because of an assessment or appeal or a proceedings, or there could be any other reason for which refund claims are arisen, and the portal allows you to claim a refund. Typically, a refund claim needs to be filed within a period of 2 years from the relevant date. The relevant date has been defined as Section 54 as in respect of export of goods by air or sea, the date on which the sea or aircraft leaves the country. In case of export of services, the date of receipt of foreign exchange. And in case of inverted duty structure, the date of filing of return. So typically 2 years needs to be counted from all these dates for claiming of refund. And if there are any other cases, it shall be date of payment of relevant tax, which shall be taken as the date for payment of date of computation of 2 years. So refund claim needs to be filed in form RFD01 as a process. Each refund claim application can be supported with 4 documents up to 5 MB each. Once the refund claim is filed, ARN number is generated. Post the ARN number is generated, there could be two options. Either within 15 days an acknowledgement is generated. If that is done, then a provisional order can be generated after 7 days of such acknowledgement. And if everything goes fine, then after 45 days, a refund order needs to be generated, which needs to be followed with disbursement in 60 days. So if everything is fine, this blue clause will get applicable and a refund claim gets triggered in a 60 days time. However, if there is any deficiency that is noted, within a period of 15 days time, a deficiency memo is issued. And as soon as the deficiency memo is issued, fresh application needs to be filed. So whatever is the fate of a refund application gets decided in 15 days of filing of refund application. Either the department follows the right route and go ahead with the processing of refund claim. And if the deficiency memo is issued for any purpose, then a fresh application needs to be filed. Those refund claims will be deemed to be cancelled only, and then the time lag shall apply from the fresh application date. So that's very important as a nomenclature, that time lag post deficiency memo issued is applicable from the date, the relevant date applicable from the fresh application only. So now we come to our first case that we'll discuss is when the goods are exported on payment of tax. In such a case, because the goods are exported on payment of tax, once we file the requisite details on GST portal, GSTN portal validates certain information. And in such a case, shipping bill that we file is considered to be a refund application. Port does normally a validation only on two counts, whether the port code is right and whether the tax amount that is mentioned in GSTR1 is matching with GSTR 3B or not. If these two details are not there, then validation error will come and the portal will not proceed any further. If these two details are fine, then the information gets transmitted to the customs portal, which is IceGate. IceGate does its part of validation, wherein it checks certain details with the shipping bill details, and everything is matched, then the refund is granted. If there are validation errors, then the refund is stopped and the validation error needs to be corrected. What is important is this entire exercise is the entire process falls through smoothly when there is a EDI port. In case of a non-EDI port where the IceGate system is not supported, specifically in case of export to Nepal and Bhopal, the entire process falls through. In such a case, we need to go through a normal process only, which is manually talking to the custom authorities. So now, while we discuss that refund claim is granted, what are the errors that normally can happen? So when we export the good on payment of tax, there are 6 kind of codes that get generated. SP000 is a code where there is no error. The details that a taxpayer is posted in GST return matches with the shipping bill details and automatically the refund is granted. It's a smooth flow. SB001, wherein the shipping bill number is incorrect. SB002, where the EGM is not filed. SB003, where the GST and match mismatches. 4 is there when the repetition of record is there. 5 is an error where invoice number is invalid, where the invoice number mentioned in the GST portal do not correspond with the invoice number there is in the shipping bill. And SB006 is where the gateway shipping bill is not issued. So we have mentioned the action that needs to be adhered with all these errors. Particularly the most important kinds of error are SB002 and SB005. SB02 with SB01 and 2. One is that where the shipping bill has details which is not corresponding to GSTR1 details. So if in GSTR1 we have mentioned an incorrect shipping bill number and the shipping bill number which is there with the IceGate portal is different. So in such a case, the option that is available with the taxpayer is to amend its GSTR1. In case of SB005, which is again a very important error, wherein the invoice number is incorrect. So if the invoice number mentioned in GST portal do not correspond with the invoice number that is there in with the customs portal, there shall be no refund claim granted. In such a case, we need to match those invoice number and we need to amend the GSTR1 only. What is most important feature is that there can be no amendment in the shipping bill once EGM is filed. So all correction needs to be done in GSTR1 only. This has a very peculiar issue because a lot of time when the GST portal does not allow for a correction, there is a situation when the entire proceedings get stuck up GST portal is not allowing a correction, shipping bill cannot be amended, and the refund claim needs to be manually processed, and therefore we are at the behest of the custom authorities to grant us the refund. So such cases are there. So in all these cases, it is advisable that a regular tracking is done so that all the errors are corrected in due course only. Apart from these, there are certain errors that a taxpayer does which results in delay in grant of refund. An error that is normally there is that zero-rated supplies are reported as a normal supply in GSTR 3B. Therefore, the GSTR 3B is not matching only as there is no zero-rated supply. The only possibility is that we do an adjustment in subsequent period and report the right export supply. Other is that IGST which we pay and declare is not mentioned in the shipping bill. So shipping bill is prepared as NA. However, the tax invoice is prepared with payment of tax, resulting in an error. The invoice number is incorrectly mentioned in the shipping bill. So while the tax invoice is correctly issued in shipping bill, that is incorrect. And third could be that there are tax amount various in the shipping bill and the tax invoice. In all such cases, we cannot amend our GST portal because probably the GST portal is reflecting the right thing. Shipping will maybe have an incorrect thing. So in such cases, as we mentioned earlier, that we need to approach the custom authorities manually to grant us the refund. If custom authorities do not entertain our claim, the option that is available with us is possible to file a writ petition with the High Court and expedite the refund claim. This is what happened in one of the case of heavy metals and tubes with the Gujarat High Court. In this case, the assessee declared the right thing on the GST portal. However, the shipping bill, it was mentioned as NA, resulting in a blockage of refund claims. So the custom authority were not granting it. The assessee had to approach a High Court, and High Court passed the requisite instructions. Third is, as we mentioned, that in case of exports to non-EDI port, there has to be a manual validation only. So again, all the jurisdictional custom authorities need to be approached. So this again are one of the reasons why the entire proceedings fall through, why there's a delay. All these actions are recommended approaches only from our side. So while this entire flow of GST on payment of tax is been going on, there are a lot of clarifications. A lot of changes have been made in respect of other refund claims, which we'll be discussing. One of this is that exports which we make with payment of tax, we file the requisite returns, the validation happens, and the refund is granted. In such a case, a taxpayer has to ensure that all the right documents are furnished. So therefore, in the recent clarification that have been given is importantly a statement that needs to be filed for export invoices. All export invoices should have a corresponding BIRC, FIRC detail along with it. From a documentation side, we need to upload GSTR to it. We need to upload copy of BIRC and FIRC, and we need to provide a statement of Annexure B, which has been recently notified, in which an input invoice detail needs to come with along with HSN. So if all these are done, normally the refund claim process falls through very clear. If there is any inconsistency and filing of these documents, this results in a deficiency note only issued. Likewise is the claim when we are exporting without payment of tax. In such a case, there are two aspects to it. Without payment of tax could be export of goods or services. When we do goods, export of goods, all shipping bill details needs to be provided, and those should be matched. In case of export of services, all BIRC, FIRC details needs to be provided, and those would be validated. Likewise, I mentioned in the earlier slide, the important components of getting a refund claim is GSTR 2A, BIRC, FIRC copy, and an input invoice detail which have an HSN-wise validation to it. In certain cases where we file inverted duty structure, similar kind of documentation is there. Only addition to it is that a CS certificate needs to be given to prove that there is no unjust enrichment. So why we highlighted all these things is because these are the latest documentation and procedure that have been brought in place to claim any refund claim. So all taxpayers must adhere to these documentation, must follow this process so as to ensure that there is no deficiency that is issued at a later stage. There are certain clarifications that have been issued, so we'll highlight the important one. One is that refund claim that is there is always a minimum of the amount that gets reflected as per the formula. That is of the credit ledger on the date of claiming of refund and on the credit ledger as on the balance on the date for which refund is claimed. So lower of 3 shall be granted as refund. There are certain clarifications with respect to inverted duty structure. That inverted duty structure refund will be granted only of the inputs. And the recent clarification has come that that inverted duty structure will not be given to the traders wherein there is a duty rate of change in respect of stock in hand. So if you have purchased a stock of 15%, the rate gets reduced to 12%, refund will not be granted. Some recent FAQs we like to quickly highlight what are the changes. One important change, the government has allowed clubbing of refund for multiple tax periods. So now, specifically for an exporter of service, if there is no export in one tax period and there is export in subsequent tax period, the exporter can club its financial years for claim of refund. Likewise, if there is a nil refund, that can be clubbed with the refund claims for a subsequent period which has a refund amount. Very importantly, a lot of taxpayer, what they do is they save their refund application. Subsequently, details needs to be updated, changed. So now the portal has a feature that all the refund applications will get saved for a period of 15 days. Post that, all the details will get undo. So therefore, you need to fill all the details again. The important part is if any document has been uploaded, that shall still remain the same. However, the details shall expire after a period of 15 days. A recent clarification, government has provided that in case there are single BIRCs issued with respect to several export invoices, those shall still remain valid for a verification. Next important clarification is refund claim shall be considered only after ARN is generated. So every taxpayer needs to ensure that the ARN is valid and is generated. One recent clarification again, which is important, is the government has clarified that other than the zero-rated claims, if any refund claim is there, then that shall be recredited to the original source. So if we are claiming our taxes, or incorrect taxes paid, and we are claiming a refund of ITC, then the refund claim shall be granted in form of ITC only and not cash. As you mentioned that once ARN is generated, then that shall be the period. So government has clarified that the interest shall be generated from 61st day since ARN generation, because that shall be the date when it will be deemed that the refund claim application has been rightly furnished. So if any interest claim has to be done, it shall be done post 61st, 161st days arises from the ARN generation. An important clarification, if you look into earlier, that government has clarified that the refund shall be based on 2A. Now, this has an ultra-virus effect to the GST law, which says that ITC can be availed up to 10% more than 2A amount. So to such an extent, there is a contradiction. In such a case, we still recommend you to adopt a policy of claiming the right ITC if there are transactions which are not reflected in 2A. In such a case, we can manually upload those invoices on the GST portal. GST portal allowing, while it's saying that the refund shall be granted on the basis of 2A, it is silent on what happens for an RCM or an ISD transaction. In our view, legally there is no bar to it. We can file a claim. If needed, we can submit those documents separately. One important thing that has come in over the past and government has been highlighting is that refund claim shall be allowed by single authority for all the claims that we make, either for SGST, IGST or CGST. So this has eased up a lot of refund claim process, as a single authority only assesses all the refund claims for us. So in terms of our discussion, what are the overall suggestions for refund claim is that it is advisable that the refund claim shall be filed before time. You should avoid filing refund claims nearby due date, because government has been issuing a lot of discrepancy deficiency. So if the refund claim due date lapses and subsequent claim needs to be filed, then those shall be considered as time barred only. We must attach all the requisite document that we feel fine. 5 MB for one document is a good enough space. We have just been able to understand that the government has increased the document from 4 to 10. So there can be 10 documents that can be attached. So this shall provide a relief. So all the documents should be attached so that there's no deficiency on account of non-providing of documents. We must regularly keep a track on the GST portal, so that if any deficiency is issued, show cause is issued, we must reply on that. A lot of time it so happens that a notice has been issued, it escapes our mind, and the entire process gets again time barred. As we mentioned earlier, that if any invoice is not in 2A, that necessarily doesn't lead to a fact that refund claim will not be available. In such a case, subject to limit of 36(4), we must upload those invoices on the GST portal. Also for the self RCM invoices and for ISD invoices, we must keep on uploading and claim a refund of that part as well. So overall, in our view, GST assumes a lot of impetus on the compliances, be it on the filing of returns, be it on generation of e-way bills, be on filing of refund claims. So as we mentioned that tax savvy is just not an option, it's a need of the hour. So given that, we have given some suggestions for all the three things. Overall basis, we feel that it is important that a taxpayer tracks all the changes and amendments. There have been amendments specifically in refund claims significantly high over the past 2-3 weeks, given the fact that government is trying to give some relaxation because of COVID also. So all such relaxation amendments, new features that are introduced on the GST portal be kept regularly tracked. There is an important need that a reconciliation is done of the returns that are filed, e-way bills that are issued, and a GST and the books of account, so that if there is any disconnect, requisite changes can be made before and only, rather than the government authority coming to us or probably auditor coming to us at a time of GST audit and providing these fact that okay, an unreconciled detail is there. Lastly, as we mentioned earlier, there could be a possible thing that our middleware or software tool is, I think, is the need of the hour. We can, while government is providing its best that a GST portal operates, however, because of these so many reconciliations, because of this so many data saving, our middleware and software can be a real assistance to everyone. So taxpayers can choose to get into this. So that was it from our side. It was great having you all here. Thank you for attending this in large numbers. If any question is there, probably because of this entire offline mode, we're not able to address, so you can write it to us. We'll be happy to answer the relevant mail IDs or in a screen. Thank you for joining, and be safe and be at home. Thanks a lot again.